Many children and teenagers are feeling isolated this year, especially now that the holidays are upon us. Remote learning and social distancing have drastically reduced the quality of life for millions of kids across the U.S. because of the pandemic. The CDC has reported mental health-related emergency department visits were up 24% for 5 to 11-year-olds and 31% for 12 to 17-year-olds from April through October compared to last year. Ramani Durvasula joins me now. She's a clinical psychologist and the author of Don't You Know Who I Am? How to Stay Sane in an Era of Narcissism, Entitlement, and Incivility. Dr. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. What losses have teenagers in particular experienced during the pandemic compared to younger children?
Teenagers have really lost out when it comes to peer relationships. In adolescence, peer relationships actually matter more almost than family relationships. That's where they get their reality checks. That's where they share their problems. So they've lost that. They've lost a lot of the benchmarks that are so significant in high school, graduations and proms, even how the things that they don't like taking standardized tests, going into a classroom, sharing ideas. They may complain about going to school. Teenagers actually don't mind as much as we think. We don't give them enough credit. They're missing out on dating, meeting new people, flirting. Those things are they're a natural part of adolescence. This is a generation that's going to have lost a year to a year and a half of this. And there's all kinds of other routines that are part of adolescence. I don't know, sitting in your car and chatting with friends, parties, all of that has gone. And I think that that's going to significantly impact teenagers in a different way, obviously, than it does kids. But also keep in mind, I think we often undersell adolescents in terms of how much empathy they have for their families. It seems like they're not empathic. I've got a teenager, I get it, but they are. And a lot of them are acutely aware of the hardships their parents are going through in terms of money, in terms of lost jobs, in terms of fears about health. And they're really struggling with that. And they often don't know where to take that powerlessness because they can't make it go away. And that can come out in so many ways. So I think teenagers in some ways are shouldering the burdens of both children and adults during this pandemic.
And what are the repercussions of that over the long term? Because obviously, the teenage years are sort of the bridge between childhood and adulthood. Mm-hmm. Are these problems that could, we could see crop up as they become adults, things that they weren't able to deal with or develop through these crucial years? How will that affect their early adulthood?
There's so much uncertainty, Tanya. I think that's the biggest concern we have here is how much uncertainty they're living with. And the more uncertainty somebody has to struggle with, the more likely it is that they might go on to develop anxiety. And this anxiety can really track them into adulthood, where it might make them much more uneasy with other uncertainties as they come. The world doesn't feel like a safe place right now. And in some ways, we're building this in all ways, we're building this airplane in the sky. So I don't even feel like adults are able to adequately mentor teenagers at this point, because I have to say, as somebody who works with college students, they're asking me questions that I've never even had to consider. So those of us who are supposed to be the ones giving guidance are also trying to figure out how to make the world feel like a more predictable place for them when it's not predictable at all. So I really do worry about the sort of anxiety that people are going to struggle with as they go into adulthood. And given how uncertain the economy is, they're wondering what's going to happen as I go into adulthood and try to find a job. I have a college-age daughter who's saying, I don't even know what kind of world I'm going into in terms of trying to find a job. And that kind of stuff actually does keep teenagers and young adults up at night. And so we have to realize we don't have those answers. Economists don't have those answers. And teenagers are struggling with this. So it may be a while before they find their footing and feel sort of fully secure as adults. All of us in the mental health profession know that one of the long-term effects of this pandemic, long after vaccines are given and we become healthy again, is going to be the mental health impacts. Just because we have a vaccine, just because we're no longer at risk, doesn't mean all of that anxiety, depression, and the other mental health impacts are going to go away. They may even become worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then what can we do, those of us with teenagers or, the people surrounding teenagers, what can we do to support them? As you just said, a lot of their anxieties are our anxieties, right? As adults, we share the same insecurities and fear of the unknown and what's going to happen after the pandemic. So should we try to pretend like everything is okay to make them feel better? What can we do to support teenagers?
The biggest mistake we make with teenagers is we don't listen to them. It's a mistake I make all the time. It's a mistake we all make all the time. Listen to them and don't minimize their concerns. Teenagers sometimes can be bigger in how they express their concerns. We might even think they're being dramatic. Don't invalidate them. Don't minimize them. And the pandemic is hitting them in ways that we as adults don't understand. They're a lot younger than us, so they're losing a larger percentage of their life to this. As adults, we can be circumspect. It's not fair to hold them to that same standard, but it's also not fair to minimize their concerns. Be present with them. Listen to their concerns, but always remember, you only get to play high school sports once. You only get a high school play once. You only get one graduation. So we can say, oh, these aren't big deals. You know, in life, it'll seem small. Yeah, maybe it will seem small in 20 years. It doesn't seem small now. So we have to simply be present. And we as parents always want to fix everything for our kids, right? We can't fix this one. This one's not going to go away. And there's a real, to me, concern when a parent tries to be overly and falsely positive, because not only does it invalidate the concerns of your child, it can actually leave them feeling like they're doing something wrong. Like, how come I'm not seeing the positive in this? What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with them. And I think that for a parent right now, to just be present with your child's anxieties, to hear them, to reflect them back, to say that you get it, and just give them a chance. We were able to hold them when they were 2- and 3-year-olds and crying it out. Adolescents may not cry it out in the same way, but just being present, but also being mindful. We've got to keep an eye on our teenagers right now. Look, if you see changes, significant changes in sleep, appetite, they're becoming more isolated, that you're noticing differences in their behavior, that is definitely sounding an alarm bell to talk to them and consider getting much more, much more responsive mental health services. Look for those changes. Pay attention to your teen, be present, listen, and don't try to fix anything and everything. None of us have all the answers, not even those of us who are doing mental health work. And so parents are really struggling with this. Just listen to them.
Great advice, Dr. Ramani Durvasula. Thank you so much for joining us. We could all use a little bit more of time with our kids, whether younger or teenagers, and just sit and listen to their concerns. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.